Hello! Today we're doing something a little bit different than the usual coding vlogs. It's finally time to do the MacBook review, and I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for this, and I just wanted to gather all of my impressions and give it some time to see how it performs in everyday work. So just for context, I've had this machine since the 6th of November, and today we're close to end of February, so that basically means I've been working with it almost every single day for about 4 months. I'm an indie app developer and I primarily work on a macOS application in Xcode, but I also work on quite a few other applications that are mostly APIs and internal tools, so I've covered quite a few development use cases. Now, when I first got this MacBook, I had a few suspicions whether or not it's going to be enough for me, and I know this is the most common question that I get about it because it is actually the base model. It's the 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage, and the base M4 chip. But after using it for about 4 months, I'm actually convinced that this was the correct choice for me. But before we get there, I just also want to make a claim that I believe this is probably the best value for money device you can currently get from Apple. However, that being said, at the end of the video I will tell you why I would choose a different configuration, slightly different than this one, if I had the opportunity to choose again. So in this video I want to cover 4 major points: the form factor, the 15-inch screen, the body of the laptop itself. Then I want to cover the display, the battery life, and the performance. And then also at the end I'm going to tell you, would I buy it again, choosing between this one and the M4 Pro that I used to have before I bricked it with a cup of coffee. So make sure to stick around and we're gonna get started with the form factor. And this is one of my favorite things about the laptop actually. I know it sounds a little bit silly, but the first time that I unboxed it and I got to hold it in my hands, it felt a lot different than the Pro laptops that I used to have, both the 16-inch and the 14-inch. It felt kind of well proportioned and light comparing to the Pro ones that feel very heavy and dense. Also, in terms of size, I think the 15-inch screen kind of is the sweet spot for carrying around and working in all kinds of different places. If you're mainly working at a desk, you could take advantage of an even bigger 16-inch screen, but for me, because I'm constantly on the move, 15-inch feels a lot more portable, even though that's only 1 inch difference. And when I compare it to my experience with a 14-inch before, I will just say that I wouldn't go back if I were to choose again. Now, when it comes to the display, the obvious downside of the Air models is that they come with a 60Hz 500 nits display, which might sound underwhelming on paper. And I know some people on Discord even said that they could never imagine themselves working on a 60Hz display. And coming back from a MacBook Pro that I used to have, I didn't notice the slower refresh rate, but over time I stopped really noticing it at all. And it doesn't bother me and it doesn't affect my productivity. And when it comes to the brightness, this is something that surprised me the most, probably about the display, because I felt like I was a little bit brainwashed that you really need a super bright display. But I've tested this one in many different conditions, and I remember one time specifically I was in the library and my back was towards the window and it was a super bright sunny day and I don't have the anti-reflective coating. But when I cranked up the brightness all the way and when I turned on light mode, which I rarely do, but in this occasion it worked out pretty well. The reflections were pretty much gone if you're looking at the screen dead on, and I was totally able to do all of my work without any eye strain whatsoever. So as an overall message that I want to convey about the specs of these MacBooks, and we're gonna come back to this when we talk about performance, but for now I just want to say that the specs on the paper can be a little bit misleading and can make you think that you need a lot more than you actually need. But overall, I will just say that the 15-inch screen is the sweet spot for productivity for me. I wouldn't change it for a 14-inch that I used to have, and I wouldn't take the compromise of taking a super heavy machine with me just for 1 extra inch of screen real estate. So that pretty much concludes the form factor and the display. But before we go to performance, I just want to point out that the color on this thing looks gorgeous in person, but only when it's clean. And it's super hard to actually keep clean. And if you watch my vlogs, you know that I've been trying my best all the time to keep it clean, but it's never really there where I want it to be. It's never really spotless. in the way that it looks like when you first take it out of the box. And that's a major chore that you have to take on if you really like this dark color. Even though that I personally like it very much, I wouldn't recommend going for, I don't know, what is this called, like midnight blue or something? Just pick up a lighter color and you will thank me later. Now, it's time to talk about the battery. This is probably my favorite thing about the MacBook Air, because it's so incredibly efficient. And again, if you've watched my vlogs, I've been actually reviewing it live, unrelated to what I was doing at the moment. And I can tell you right away that on multiple occasions, I found myself with like 10% of battery while recording a coding vlog. And I would finish all of the recordings, I would actually do work for 2 hours, compiling in Xcode, doing live previews, you know, talking with people on Discord, and doing recordings with my phone. And after 2 hours, the MacBook would be at like 3% battery and still going strong. It's probably the most impressive thing about it. And it's so efficient, it's super whisper quiet, and it's such a joy to use. And again, on multiple occasions, it has happened that, for example, I'm at 30% battery or something, and my wife, when she goes to work, she's like, "Oh, I accidentally took your charger," and I wouldn't even think about it. It wasn't even a factor for me. If the Mac was over 30% battery, I totally knew that I can do a full day of work as much as I can personally handle in terms of staying focused and doing productive stuff. And I never had battery anxiety. One time I even left it over the weekend at a very low percentage in my daughter's kindergarten, like completely locked away. I couldn't charge it, I couldn't get to it. And on Monday morning, I drop her off and I pick up my laptop and it's still going. Like, this thing is crazy efficient, especially in standby mode. So I'm really happy with that. Now, let's talk about performance, because this is probably the most controversial part of the video. You know, it's kind of hard to talk about performance without bringing up numbers and benchmarks, but again, I'm coming back to this point. The numbers, benchmarks, and specs on paper can be very misleading in terms of convincing you what you actually need. Because, for example, when I was looking at these configurations back when I was buying my M4 Pro 14-inch Mac, I was convinced that for my professional development work and for running Xcode and stuff, I would absolutely need the Pro chip. But I will tell you right away that that is not the case. And how do I know that? At some point, while I still had my M4 Pro, MacBook Pro, I got an iMac to share with my wife at home. And I got the base model iMac M4 chip, the same one that I have in the MacBook Air. And at the time, I did some benchmarking and tests in terms of compilation times in Xcode and all kinds of other productivity applications, including rendering videos in DaVinci Resolve, and I came to the realization that really the Pro chip doesn't matter all that much, because the Xcode compilation times were pretty much identical between the base model and the M4 Pro. And the video rendering times were also identical as well, which is very confusing. The only app that had a significant difference in performance between the two chips was really Blender, rendering some 3D models that I had prepared before. But everything else, everyday work, everyday productivity, coding, compiling, building apps, there was virtually no difference whatsoever. And for what it's worth, I will just point out that in terms of the chip itself, for most developers, anything beyond the base model is probably an overkill. But now let's talk about the memory side, because a lot of people might think that 16 gigabytes is not really enough. And that can be the case, for example, if you're running a lot of Docker containers, or for example, if you're doing, I don't know, scientific work and you're doing some very heavy simulations. But for everyday coding, like web development, running a few databases here and there, like for example, I'm running Mongo constantly locally and a few servers, and I always have Xcode open and I always have a couple of browser windows open. The memory on this thing just never gets exhausted. It's very efficient with the paging as well, and I never really see any performance degradation. The only reason that I would potentially consider more memory is, for example, if you're running many containers, let's say that you're developing a microservices-based architecture, at that point I can see how just allocating a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes here per container and per image can start to eat into your available RAM. But if you're developing some simple servers at home, or maybe you're just doing front-end development or client-side development like I'm doing in Xcode, even with a simulator running, And I will come back to the situation with the simulator a little bit later, but even with the simulator running, I never really had a problem running out of memory with 16 gigs on the base M4 chip. And you know guys, because I'm an indie app developer and I don't have any kind of VC investment in my apps, sometimes a quick sponsored segment helps me pay the bills and keep improving the products that I mostly offer for free for you guys. So today we have a quick sponsored segment, and when we get back, I will talk to you about would I buy this machine again, and even though I still believe this is the best value for money Apple device you can buy right now, what configuration I would choose differently. But first, a quick word from, thanks to the sponsor of this video, OPIT, the Open Institute of Technology. OPIT is an online, fully EU-accredited higher education institution whose mission is to train the next generation of leaders in technology by offering high-quality, modern, and affordable degrees in this field. For those who are only starting their path in tech or want to upgrade their knowledge, OPIT offers Bachelor of Science program in Digital Business and Modern Computer Science. And for those who want to gain deeper knowledge and already have a bachelor's degree in any field, OPIT offers Master of Science program in Applied Data Science and AI, Digital Business, Enterprise Cybersecurity, and Responsible AI. The programs at OPIT are designed to be flexible, allowing students to progress at their own pace. As I've mentioned many times in my vlogs, cybersecurity and artificial intelligence are two of the most in-demand fields in tech today. Companies everywhere are struggling to hire qualified specialists, and the salaries are growing each year. A cybersecurity analyst already earns around $120,000 per year on average in the USA, and in AI the numbers are even higher. AI engineers earn roughly $130,000 to $145,000 per year on average, depending on the role and country. The entire program costs less than one monthly salary in those roles. So check out the link in the description, fill out the short form, and take a free consultation with an OPIT representative if you're thinking about investing in your career. Alright, so let's try to review what I've said so far, and let's try to draw some conclusions. So first of all, would I buy it again if, for example, all of my computers were suddenly destroyed? The answer is yes. And this is simply because, again, this is the best value piece of hardware that you can get from Apple right now. It comes with a very decent display, very high resolution, perfectly usable even outside, although with a lower refresh rate. But if you can live with that, given that it's also perfectly calibrated and color accurate, you're going to have an incredible productive machine for not a lot of money, and the base M4 chip, in all of my experience, has been plenty capable to drive any kind of development work. However, that being said, I would change only one thing about this configuration. I would choose a little bit more storage. So I currently have 256 gigs, and for the most part, it was perfectly fine and usable. However, there is one case that I encountered that I couldn't just simply fix with an external storage drive. So even though I mostly develop a macOS application in Xcode, recently I was working on another project that also had an iOS component. And the moment I installed the simulator, the storage on my Mac was pretty much gone. And this was really hard to get around because I didn't anticipate how much storage the iOS simulator will actually consume with all of the compiled libraries and all the caching that it does. It's just a lot. And if you're doing any kind of mobile development, I would highly advise getting the 512 gigabytes storage option at the very least, because everything else you can kind of optimize. You can move your files to the cloud, you can move them to an external drive. If you're a content creator like me, you can use a NAS, you can use, again, an external drive. But when it comes to system level components like the iOS simulator and other stuff and junk that Xcode tends to accumulate over time, it's really hard to move it to another location. So that was the one thing that I regretted. And if I were to buy another MacBook, it would most definitely be the base model of whatever chip is currently available, be it the M5 or the M4, just with a little bit of extra storage. So that's really my review of this laptop after 4 months of daily use, deploying, running these apps in production, making new features, recording these vlogs, and everything in between. So if you have any more questions, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to answer. I always read all of your comments and I try to get back to as many of you as I can, and I really appreciate your support. So if you like this video, consider subscribing. It really helps me a lot. Give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one.